Hey everybody, another episode of Koop Talking at the Camera. These things probably need a name at some point. For now, it's Koop Talking at the Camera though. We're going to talk about ways that to improve co-op in Elden Ring and Souls-like titles, and why more invasions actually will lead to better co-op quality overall. So in the comments of my Lords of the Fallen video, people were asking questions like, hey, do you have problems with people who don't want to get invaded? You seem to have beef with people who don't want to get invaded. And I definitely don't. It makes total sense that you don't want to get invaded. That's an additional challenge on top of what you're already experiencing, which is a really hard game. Most people who sign up for an Elden Ring experience, even when they're co-oping, don't really realize that they're doing online co-op and that they're actually invadable. So my kind of bias in this whole situation is I want to have a situation where co-op is at its best and where invasions can still live and thrive. And I think that those two things can coexist together. And I think the key to actually making this thing work is to reintroduce solo invasions. What are solo invasions, and what do people mean when you hear PvP people talking about solo invasions? The most basic understanding is that a person by themselves can be invaded if they're playing online. In Dark Souls 3, you had to use an Ember, which was like, it would give you more HP and a few other stats, and you got these for free. You automatically became Embered after every boss win, and it was also an item that you could pick up in the world. So you would have an incentive to use this to make PvE easier, but then you have the downside of being invadable. And in order to co-op, you needed to use an Ember as well. So you're probably wondering, why would bringing solo invasions back actually improve the overall co-op experience? That doesn't seem connected, right? Well, I will illustrate it for you. Imagine that this is the entirety of the Elden Ring player base. So these are all of this. This represents, every person who plays Elden Ring is right in here. Then within this bubble, we have people who are doing co-op. Right, so over here we have all of the Elden Ring players. Over here we have co-op players. Exactly, some people are moving back and forth between these two groups, right? And then over here we have invaders. Here's the basic way of figuring this out. When the vast majority of players who play the game solo. So they don't invite other players into their world. They just play through the game by themselves. Maybe they use spirit summons, maybe they don't, doesn't really matter. The vast majority of players are playing solo experience with online enabled. Then you have a small portion of people who are playing co-op with their friends. I think it's fair to say co-op players want to be invaded the least. There's a good chance that as a co-op player, you want to be invaded the least out of everybody in the game. Why is that fair to be assumed? The reason that I think that's a fair assumption is that the average person who's co-oping either wants to play with a friend or actually really needs the help to progress. There's all sorts of experiences when you're co-oping together with people, right? But I think it's a fair assumption to say that there's going to be a decent amount of people who want to just be playing with friends and actually really need the help to progress. Because co-op players form they're like spirit summons, right? They make the game easier. And again, that's not me saying it trivializes it or trying to put down people who play the game with it. I'm just saying it does make it easier, especially if your friends are higher level than you. The current state of the game is that invaders can only target these people. Whether we like it or not, whether we want to or not, it doesn't really matter how we feel about it. We just cannot target anyone else. As a prerequisite in Elden Ring, you cannot invade anybody but somebody who is co-oping. So not only does this significantly limit the amount of people that we can invade, it tends to target the people who want to be invaded the least. Again, I'm sure that some part of the people out here don't want to be invaded either. Some part of them don't care, because the truth is this, and this is just a truth I think people really need to get their minds get into, I guess. The amount of people who really hate PvP, I think, is a very, very, very vocal minority of people. As far as I can tell, having been in the community for a while, having talked to quite a lot of people with lots of different opinions, there's a very, very, very small minority of people who genuinely hate being invaded. The state of the game currently is that the only people that we get to target are people playing co-op. That just really, it's just a feels bad thing for almost everyone. That means that your chances of fighting a 3v1 are super high. Your chances of getting ganked are super high. There's just way less diversity of options that we can invade, right? What enabling solo invasions does for the game is it allows invaders to target everyone equally. All of these people who are in here, all of those invasions are concentrated on these specific people. When solo invasions are open to every single person who's playing online, concentration and frequency of being invaded as a co-opper, or frankly as anyone, will go down significantly, while boosting the amount of activity for the people who do want to actually choose that. One of the things that's often frustrating as a person who likes doing invasions is that you'll find that sometimes you just invade the same co-oppers over and over again. You know that there are other people playing the game, but you just end up invading the same people over and over again, and it starts to kind of feel bad after a certain amount of time. Ultimately, what this will do is not only help invasions in PvP overall and help expose more people, it will also significantly improve the average quality of the co-op player's experience, because they're not absorbing 100% of all of the invasions in the game. The other thing to remember, and this is a bit of a side note, is that playing through the PvE of the game with invasions on is actually very, very, very fun. One of the things that is really frustrating about Elden Ring right now is that if you want to play through the PvE, the base PvE game, and you want people to invade you, you have to use an item called the Taunter's Tongue, and the Taunter's Tongue makes you like the highest priority of invasion, and it allows 2 people to invade you at once. And it gets rid of your cooldown timer. So normally when you get invaded, there's a 5-minute cooldown between the next time you can get invaded. When you have the Taunter's Tongue on, that turns off. If you're just playing through the game by yourself and you want to be invaded, you turn on the Taunter's Tongue, but then you're non-stop invaded. It's like it's relentless, the amount of invasions that you get when you have Taunter's Tongue on. And it's just not very fun. One invasion every 5 minutes though, that sounds like a really fun type of run through the game for me personally. Ultimately, for everyone, what it does is this gives a much more balanced, much more even experience of PvP, and gives a kind of softer on-ramp for people to actually experience PvP, that it's an important part of this actual kind of, infrastructure of this whole game. So you could just be playing through the game on your own with, but online, and then at maximum, you're going to be invaded once every 5 minutes. And even then, with this different number of people, you are not going to have the same frequency of being invaded by other people. These are going to be significantly spread out, because there's only so many invaders that are on that can be invaded, right? My basic argument is just that. I have no problem with people who want to avoid getting invaded. I am all for spreading out those invasions over as many people as possible so that the intensity is way lower. And it also just means that the onboarding experience as well for doing invasions is a lot chiller. Your average invasion is going to be you fighting one person, as opposed to jumping neck deep into a 3v1, right? So I really see this as something that is a win-win for every single person involved. We can talk a little bit more at length, probably some other time, about avoiding PvP, but my general attitude towards avoiding PvP is you can always play offline. If you want to play online with online features, FromSoft has decided that you have engaged in PvP. You're now doing PvP. Again, personally, I don't see PvP as something that is game ruining or trolling people. I see it as something that is fun, and the goal of it is to have fun and interesting experiences together with other people. Ultimately, I think that if you are trying to avoid invasions, this is kind of a longer topic that we can talk about. But if you're trying to avoid the PvP part of the game, you can always play offline. What people don't really understand is that the invasion mechanic in particular, including dueling, is what sets FromSoft's online experience apart from others. To move to an opt-in only, so like you only invade people who want to be invaded, it's super ripe for griefing and kind of game ruining, like truly game ruining behavior. And that's something that we're seeing all the time in Elden Ring currently, is that because co-oppers are the only people who can become invaded, all that people who want to do game ruining behavior need to do is get into a co-op lobby, pop on the Taunter's Tongue, and be as brutal as they want to be. This sort of system, it really eliminates the ability for any one person to target anyone else. Again, spreads everything out equally among a huge player base for Elden Ring. Something that people need to remember is that Elden Ring has a much more massive player base than the previous titles, and also PvP, in terms of ratio, is not that big. There are probably the same amount of invaders as was in DS3, but a significantly higher amount of people can be invaded. So ultimately, if you're someone who's trying to avoid getting invaded, play offline. I don't mean that in a belittling way. I don't mean that in any sort of mean way. That is the option that FromSoft has given you in order to avoid invasions completely. In Lords of the Fallen, it looks like there is an option to play online co-op, and then there's an item that you can use which will disable invasions for a short period of time. I'm totally not against that. I would just not want those kinds of items to make it so that a person can't ever be invaded. Personally, myself, like, this is just genuinely my own personal opinion. I love PvP and I love doing PvE while being invaded. So I wouldn't want to have a game where I can't be invaded. Not having online multiplayer just significantly limits the actual lifespan of games. I think of Lies of P, a game that I'm really enjoying right now. You know, ultimately it's going to have a very limited lifespan and a very, you know, I'm not going to play it through very many times because I'm going to play it through maybe once, maybe twice, and experience everything that the game has to offer. Online interactions, both in terms of co-op and in terms of invading, adds that next level of spice that you just can't get anywhere else in any game. I want people to have options to not get invaded, and in Elden Ring you have that, which is playing offline. Because this is a completely unique experience, because we can't experience this kind of PvP anywhere else in the world, the idea of making invasions in such a way where you can only invade people who want to be invaded will just kill invasions. Like, that's what we've seen time and again when other people make Souls-likes with opt-in PvP. Those games, the PvP just dies because obviously no person would want to choose an additional roadblock in the form of invasions. Like, no person would actively ever choose that option. In fact, if there was an easy mode in Elden Ring, I'm sure that people would choose that as well, and to make the game even easier for themselves. That's a really important design mechanic for games like Elden Ring, like Dark Souls, that you don't really get to choose those things. You can just use different kinds of builds and kind of just try and get through the experience as FromSoft wanted to present it to you. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on how to improve co-op by increasing the amount of people who can be invaded. Let me know what you guys think about this kind of stuff in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Hello, Tarnished. Consider clicking that like button and absolutely annihilating that subscribe button because TheKoop is based. Ranny out.